Every step I take, you take with me, yeah. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to hide. I got nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to hide.
Hey, good morning, kids. It's your old buddy Grandpa coming to you again. Floating through your consciousness as we float through YouTube and just having a great time doing it. Good morning to you. A beautiful day, 'cause you're there, alive and awake within it. And babies, you rock. All of us human beings, we's rock and rollers, strummers and strollers. We ain't the kind to shy away from something 'cause it's a little bit difficult, you know. We know how to handle things, you know. The more aware we become, the more conscious we become, the less effort it takes. Well, it's all relative, though, whatever you consider effort. If stress is effort, then sometimes you have to release a lot of that. I tell you, being born different in this world, way I was, way a lot of you were, you know, can present some rather unique challenges. I was rummaging around over there on this Facebook page from my old hometown, which is not Santa Claus, Arizona. That's a joke. This little former farming community that sits up against the mountains there in Utah. Beautiful place to be in. I tell you, those mountains, just like the mountains here, just take your breath away, man. And you live right up on top of them. They live right on top of you. It's awesome. I remember communing with angels up there in those mountains when I was a kid. It's the one place I could go and experience some freedom, some refreshment, some nature and God. You know, though I sure didn't call it that when I was a kid. It's just a breakaway. Just get me out there and let me be a mountain goat on that mountain, please, you know, or take my ponies and ride, you know. So it was kind of fun that way, and I did, you know, I was born into a family that had a farming and ranching operation, so we were like fairly busy beings. I had slave labor from 5 years old on. Got put on the payroll though when I was 12, man, you know. I don't know how that worked because I always came out behind, you know, losing my hiney on this thing, you know. It's been that way ever since, basically. I'm in a cruise stage now, but who knows how long that's going to last, you know. Onward and upward. This is the ascending path now. I'm going to get a bigger credit card one of these days, and I'm not going to have to work very hard to do it. I think it's time to change the way we do everything here, especially business, you know. I mean, if we're moving in this direction anyway, and that's our destiny, is ascendancy, why can't we start off with just changing the way we do business basically, you know, in this world? It's really easy, guys. All you gotta do is give a shit. Just care a little bit about your fellow human beings, you know? Ask yourself in every instance if your actions are contributing to the higher good, or if they're a step backwards in the reality and you're showing heartlessness again, etc. You know, I mean, just turn off the cruel side that's been so ingrained into you. You can do that. Just step back in a moment of love, embrace that ugly darkness inside, and thank it for being such a good guy and such a brutal master and teacher. And then release it, let it go, put it in its place. Let it harbor itself, you know, in some other space inside. Don't keep it in the dark and ugly, because it doesn't belong there. It's a part of you too. It's misperceived itself, and that's why there's been so much cruelty in this world. Because you didn't even know you had a freaking heart. Now you do. Or at least you're learning it. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, babies in arms, we're like headed in some very powerful directions. You know, not only are we going to deal with Fukushima and sunspots and radiation storms and everything else they can possibly throw at us, economic disaster, etc. But we're going to bring all of us out smelling like a rose. This is the age of triumph, the age of truth, the age of real love inside, babies. Real love, you know. I love you so much, I just want to kiss you all the time, babies. Every one of you. I restrain myself because I know it's not kosher in this reality. But babies, I'm telling you, these guys on the mountain, now we're speaking relative terms, the dudes on top of society, the dudes and dudettes, because they're both, and mostly dudes though. And anyway, as the changes gradually seep in, as people begin to realize and just give a shit, just care a little bit about their fellow human beings, it's going to change the way we operate our economic systems. You know, what I see is these dudes and dudettes making such a switch that they use the current system in reverse. I mean, it's revamped, of course, because it's got to have a heart. But they use this current system to, like, do the reverse of what they've been doing. They find a way to creatively give it all back, especially those that have done without for so long so that others could live with wealthy food on their table and so forth. Do you realize that's why we have classes of poverty? Because, well, some people just can't get the system in their soul and they just won't do it. And so they're always on the low end. Hell, I'm one of them in a way, but I never felt myself in poverty. I've had my opportunities and stuff. You know, it's been a good life. It's been trying as hell, but a good one. And, but anyway, you know, that's why these poverty classes exist. It's so that others can, you know, live to excess. So it takes about, 10 billion broke folks to support one rich one. You know what I mean? At least that's the way they see it, you know. There's no, and I'm not bemoaning the rich for being what they are. I mean, most of you are born into it. Some of you are the nouveau riche. You don't know your butt from a hole in the ground, but got lucky and made some money on something, you know. But you got some real lessons to learn. So do these old families that think they rule the world. You know, but that's all right. We all come to it in our own way, in our own space, in our own time. But I can tell you, I can see this world becoming a much more gracious place as we move on into this 2014. Right now, it seems there's a severe amount of brutality, especially in the U.S. of A. There's an assault on the economy. There's an assault on the people. To make us into a third world country. The changes have come hot and heavy in the past few years, to the point where skilled people can no longer make a decent living because they're undercut by, well, imported workers that work cheap. And that brings the wages down for everybody. And the lifestyle in America is changing greatly. And then here they are on top of all of that, attempting to kill us off with all the sprays in the air, the radiation from Fukushima, the oil disasters in the Gulf, things like that. You know, I mean, babies, it's time we turn this thing around a bit. You know, it's time to care. That's all that really matters here, you know, really. When it all comes down to it, what are you going to take with you when you die? Or if you're going to die, what are you going to take with you? What's left at the end of the trail after all that long ride through all these severe changes? What do you get in the end? What do you carry with you? What's in your saddlebags? But that ain't going with you either. What's been important to you? You know? If you think you're goddamned and condemned to hell forever because you've lived a pretty ugly life, maybe you ought to take another look. Maybe there's forgiveness for everything, because we're just playing roles, baby. We're just doing what we're programmed to do for the most part. We program ourselves in that creative way too. We're relearning our source now, so it won't be this way much longer anyway. But what I'm telling you guys is like, you're going to change. It's going to happen. And we're going to sweep away this world in a huge wave of love. Sweep away all the inequities and bring everybody back to a conscious state of being, where this thing known of as insanity, where you're out of control of yourself, and most of us are, goes away, evaporates, and we settle into the one of the most sane and joyous places you could ever imagine for yourself and for all human beings. I've had this vision, this dream in my heart since I was a little kid. I was so frustrated with the world when I was little. I really did want to see it burn down and start over again, because it seemed like what we had wasn't worth too much. Though we do manage to get some compassion and some caring going on, despite all of the harshness of our economics and our isolated way of being. Babies, if you could see the future the way I see it, you'd be rushing towards it. You'd let go of every damn fear you have right now, and you'd be hauling ass for the spiritual freeway, babies. You would. 150 frickin' miles an hour in a Honda. See, the basic flaw in our society, the worst part of it, is the isolation that's practiced here. We take people and we put them off in little boxes. That's the Western way. Or little teepees, whatever, you know what I mean? Nobody's living together any longer. We're all in this separate little box where we gotta like pay our own bills, do our own thing, find our own way, raise our own kids, have our own partners, and contribute what we can, and blah, 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 and just grab, grab, grab. And you can't care too much about your neighbors. They're not even usually your friends. Usually don't even talk to them here in the Western world. God, I'm glad there's places that are more friendly than that, where neighborhoods are still neighborhoods. I can remember that from when I was a child living out west here. It was quite the gracious neighborhood we lived in. And yeah, there was rivalries and angers and, just about everything in between there. We all had very vast differences in our personalities. But we got along in that basic way that everybody, had agreement. If there was a difficulty, the neighborhood would work it out. One neighbor's house burned down, we helped him rebuild it. When I was a kid, I bought myself a car and built myself a racetrack down the street and was hauling butt around there and throwing clouds of dust a mile into the air. And the neighbors started complaining about that, and we just put the old car away. I went down and tore up hayfields instead of like the vacant lot down below the tracks there. I was filling everybody's house full of dust in the neighborhood. My point being, though, that we cared. And when the hobos came to the door, my mother, who was kind of a pious woman, I mean, she was a character, but she would never refuse anybody. She'd make them work a little bit, go pull some weeds for her, pick some flowers or something, so that they did a little something for her, because she just didn't believe folks should have just a handout. She had, the old ways, the old school ways, man. And my parents, Jesus H., they came from horses and buggies and walking everywhere you go and rural living, to like the jet age in their time, in their 90-something years, man. I mean, they saw a lot, and went through a lot because of it too. But and so I honor them. I didn't understand them when I was a kid, but I honor them for, living the zombie life they had to live. It hurt, I'm sure. I mean, in ways that can't even be described. The pain of such a life must be excruciating. They're in them lower subdural levels that we don't always pay attention to. Because you don't always live the most intelligently when you're living in that programmed way. It's difficult, folks in my parents' generation, which came through basically both wars, big wars. The first one when they were just little, so they weren't called up, but the next one was right in the middle of it one way or another. It was a horrible thing, man. They were all pretty much militarized, robotic, didn't know a free life when they could have one because they couldn't have one. Everything was structured. You fit in a structure and that's where you were. And that's the way it's been. It's the isolation, the singularity. The only time we work together as a group is when we're called together on somebody's payroll.